Actually, today's first speaker doesn't need any introduction. Professor John Wells, who just a year ago retired as a professor of phonetics in this department. And after 40 years in the Department of Phonetics and Linguistics, and well known to everybody, I'm sure, as the author of many books you must be using, and the author of a widely read blog and a vast amount of website information. Actually, it's a double treat today because you're getting John twice, first this morning and then again at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So I think without any further introduction from me, we'll hand over to John.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. This is the first lecture I've given at UCL since my retirement a year ago. Has everybody got a handout? They're by the door, and for each of my lectures will be by the door. So today's talk is about vowels, their qualities and their contrasts. The first thing I want to talk about is just mentioned on one line of the handout, right at the top of the handout, where it says the RP's strong vowels, schematic diagrams, followed by the phrase phonotactics, short vowels need a coda. What I'm going to talk about first then is that short vowels need a coda. One basic question in English is, how do we justify the distinction we make between long vowels and short vowels? Because, in fact, all vowels vary very considerably in duration depending on the position they're in. If we take a word such as teacher, although that's a vowel that durationally is pretty short, we classify it as a long vowel. Why? Well, on the basis of its quality, of course, its timbre. But there is a much more deep-rooted thing in English that means that we have two classes of vowels. And this concerns what's called their phonotactics. That means the kinds of syllable in which they can occur, the restrictions upon the positions they can occupy. If we just think for a moment about another language, about Japanese, Japanese vowels have the restriction that they can only be followed by a nasal, an thing, or a doubled obstruent, as in happa. Apart from those two things, all Japanese vowels have to be final in the syllable. Yoko, ha, ma, fu, ku, or ka, and so on. So Japanese has very stringent restrictions on the phonotactics. English doesn't. Of course, English has plenty of final consonants. But if we look at the question of which vowels can occur Japanese style in open syllables, syllables without a final consonant, syllables without a coda, as we call it, then we find that it's the long vowels and the diphthongs that can occur in open syllables. There are some typical monosyllabic words with no final consonant. See, bar, stir, day, no. So that's no great surprise. But when we look at the short vowels, we find something different. We don't have any stressable syllables of the type si. That's what the asterisk means, the star, an impossible word. You can't have an English word bat. You can't have an English word star. You can't have an English word deaf. You can't have an English word not. But you can have sit, bad, stuck, deaf, knock. Because there we have a final consonant in the syllable, and that means it's now all right. You can, of course, also have final consonants for the long vowels. There are words like seek and bark, and sturdy, and so on, date, nose. And so the long vowels and diphthongs can occur in any kind of syllable. but the short vowels are restricted to those that have a final consonant, or as we call it, a coda. That's all coda means. Well, having said that, I propose to you the division of the vowels and diphthongs that you see on the chart, which is on the handout, which is reproduced on the screen. On the handout, we just read straight across. On the screen, we've got them arranged in the 4 quadrants. So, first of all, we can clearly separate out the short vowels from everything else, because these are the ones that require a coda. So I put those in one set. Then the others I've divided into the long vowels and diphthongs that go into the general E area, E, A, I, Oi, all moving up there. Those that go to the general oo area, O, ow, oo. And those that are or go to the sort of central area, are, ear, air, or. And that's the order in which we'll look at them. First of all then, here are the short vowels. Your practical class teacher will, I'm sure, if necessary, give you plenty of practice in making them and in discriminating them. But to summarize, we've got a short I as in kit, a short E as in dress, a short A as in trap, a short A as in strut, a short O as in lot, and a short U as in foot. And those are the short vowels of this kind of English. And now the long vowels that go towards the E area: fleece, face, price, choice, starting in various different places, but all ending up in the general E zone. By the way, there is a problem in English in making a distinction between long vowels and diphthongs, because, first of all, some long vowels can be pronounced somewhat diphthongally, and secondly, because some diphthongs can be pronounced monophthongally. So in the case of E, when we count 1, 2, 3, listen to that 3, 3, 3, 3, E, 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 E. It's very often a little bit of a diphthong. Not so much in a word like fleece, where it's followed by a voiceless consonant, but there is some flexibility here. And of course, in some kinds of English, that's very exaggerated, so Londoners count 1, 2, 3, as we shall hear this afternoon. It is, of course, very important to make the difference between the long vowel and the short vowel. So there's our favourite minimal pair. That's a sheep, and that's a ship. I'm sure in your ear training you've all practiced saying, is that a ship? No, it's a sheep. Is that a sheep? No, it's a ship. Is that a ship? Yes. Is that a sheep? Yes. And so on. And I'm sure you practice that with your students if you teach this. Well, this is a very important contrast. Important why? Well, because there are lots and lots of words, pairs of words, distinguished in this way. So here are some more. Green, grin, cheek, chick, read, rid. And you've got further examples in the booklet for practice that you were given. That's what there is in your booklet for practice. So more pairs: did, leave, live, is, and so on. Now, have we got any people who speak Spanish here? Yes. This is a particularly important contrast for Spanish speakers of English. The phonetics of Spanish is such that these two words tend to come out identically as these. But neither of them is these. One is these, plural, these, and the other is this, singular, this. And they differ in the vowel and in the final consonant. And it's an absolute giveaway of a Spanish accent in English, shall we say, to have this for both of them. Because it's very sensitive to this distinction because it carries the singular plural. What's this? What are these? And so we hear it all the time. And if you're not making it, it sounds annoying. All right, now on to the oo, o, ow set. So there we have a goose, a little bit detached. I pronounce this as goose. You will hear people pronouncing it as goose, or indeed as geese, because this vowel is changing at present in English. So that's why I've put the animal over there to remind you that it's sort of moving in that direction. But people of my age, we say goose still, so that's what I say. And the moon, and so on. Look at the moon. No, look at the moon. All right, that's the O. This is also pretty variable in English. I say goat, O, which is a little sort of mainstream quality, I think, nowadays. And that's ow. Again, there is a bit. All of them diphthongs, though, mouth. And then we've got the remainder, the centering diphthongs, as they're called, and the long central vowels. So, air as in near, air as in square, as in nurse, r as in start, or as in thought, and as in cure. Things are happening here too. No language stands still, English is changing. One of the things you may have noticed is people using a monophthong for air and saying not square, as I do, but square. Doesn't matter at all. You can sit on a chair, or you can sit on a chair, and we don't mind. If you say it as a long air, though, you do have to watch the length distinction when compared with short air, because we have minimal pairs like shed in the garden and shared distributed. And if you say shed and shared, then you have to listen to the length difference. Whereas if, like me, you say shed and shared, it's reinforced by the quality difference. Or, as in thought, for some people is a bit diphthongal, and indeed used to be in certain words. So when I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, I'm using a monophthong. But you will hear some people say 1, 2, 3, 4. What you won't hear is people saying 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 4. That's just Japanese. That thing is not a door in any kind of English. It's a door. In my English, it may be a door for Americans or a door in some kinds of regional English, but I'd recommend you to say it as door. Is gradually disappearing from the language, though not as fast as some people have claimed. But there are various words that traditionally had like poor, opposite of rich, where more and more people say or, so poor, opposite of rich. This is mine, that's yours. That's by now the mainstream pronunciation, not yours, but yours. Okay, now let's get on to some more interesting stuff, providing we can make all the contrasts of all the vowels we've looked at so far. There are further questions that arise. English is a language in which unstressed vowels have a tendency to be reduced or weakened. Languages of the world differ in whether they do this. Spanish doesn't, Catalan does. Serbian, I think, doesn't, but Russian certainly does. Japanese doesn't. What this means is that if you speak a language that doesn't reduce, you have to sort of struggle about reducing some of these vowels. Well, we have 3 particular vowels in English that are only found as a result of vowel weakening. These are the vowel at the end of happy, the vowel at the end of thank you, and the vowel at the end of words like comma. An example there. And we see these in phrase, common standards for bananas, where we've got lots and lots of common standards for bananas. And we don't in English say common standards for bananas. or something like that. We say in common standards for bananas, bananas, bananas. You can hear that weakening, not bananas, but bananas, bananas, bananas. So that's vowel weakening. If you have a look at your handout now, there's a bit on that. So those three special weak vowels, the schwa, the is found in fact only in weak syllables. And in my notation, the symbols plain letter I and plain letter U with no length marks and no special small capitalization or anything, these are found only in weak syllables. So what's this about? Well, as we know, in strong syllables, you have to make the difference between E and I. Read and grin mean two different things. Sleep is one thing, slip is another. Don't slip on the floor, but it would be absurd to say don't sleep on the floor, unless I found somebody who wouldn't use a bed or a futon. There's a difference between feeling and filling. All right, those are in stressed syllables, stressable syllables at any rate. But the end of happy, coffee, valley, there's no such contrast. You can't make a difference between two different words by saying happy in one and happy in the other, or between coffee in one and coffee in the other. In fact, what we do is often quite difficult to classify. I say happy. Is that an E or is it an E? You can't really tell. And it doesn't matter, because in this position, the distinction between them is, as we say, neutralized, suspended, obscured. Obscured, if you prefer. Similarly, if I say valley, is it valley? Well, it might be. Or is it valley? Well, it might be. It doesn't matter. Furthermore, if you are worried about this, it's changing, which makes it even worse. People of my generation have, my kind of social background, have a pretty openish grin kind, happy, whereas people who share the same sort of social background, that are 30 years younger, tend to say happy, happy with a tighter E. So it doesn't matter at all. This is good news, of course, for all learners of English. It's important, okay, in stressed syllables to make this difference. But in unstressed syllables, you can do anything you prefer, whatever comes easily. So don't complain about this. Be pleased about this. Okay, it also applies in one or two other positions. In the weak position in the middle of a word like glorious. Now, is that glorious or is it glorious? There's no time to tell. It's glorious. You don't know which it is. It's pretty short in duration, traditionally regarded as a short vowel, but it may be actually quite tense, glorious. Words like me have a weak form, different from the strong form. Arguably, the strong form is E, me, just like green and whatnot, but the weak form is this indeterminate happy vowel. So we say, tell me, just like happy. And for some people it might sound like it, tell me. For others it might sound like E, tell me. We don't mind, you can do whichever you prefer. Native speakers of English are quite sensitive to this because it signals social information to us. If I say, happy, coffee, valley, that's a caricature of an upper class accent. I went to a very interesting visit to the Tower of London recently with Professor Taniguchi, and we had a guide there who was an excellent actor. And he was telling us about the history of the meridian line there, and the history of the astronomers in the observatory at Greenwich. And he not only told us an interesting story, but he put on different accents depending on who was speaking. So when he was representing King George III, I think he was, who probably actually spoke German rather than English, but never mind, he used this upper-class caricature and would have said, happy, very happy to see you here, my dear fellow. And when he was being the astronomer, he used mainstream kind of received pronunciation. And when he was being a workman, a carpenter building something, then he put on a working class accent, which was great fun for those of us who are native speakers of English, but I think might have been a bit over the head, as we say, of those for whom English is a foreign language. Well, sorry about all that screen. The remaining information is basically as on the handout. That just reproduces the handout for you. So we've got this E thing and the corresponding U in the weak form of you, thank you. If you were to stress it, of course, you'd say thank you, then it would go back to the strong vowel, oo. But when it's weak, no. Prevocalic, as in glorious, which we've had, radiation, he isn't, ooh in situation, influence, to ask. So this really says in posh words what I've just been saying to you. Neutralization is demonstrated by same speaker fluctuation. That is, one moment somebody says happy, next moment they say happy. The use of phonetically intermediate sounds. If I say happy, it's sort of halfway between E and A. And the other point that inflected forms still have these, so babies has that same thing in it, whatever it is, and it can vary, and it doesn't matter which you do. Now, we can sort of find pairs to demonstrate the difference, because although you get reduction vowels only in unstressed syllables, you can also get strong vowels in unstressed syllables. That's one of the complications in English. So, when we insert something, the result is called an insert. Something that's been inserted has a different stress and is called an insert, but it still has ert. And you can compare that with concert, where you have the expected schwa. So there's a difference in those two vowels. One is strong, one is weak, that's the point. Pedigree has a strong E at the end. Mimicry has the weak vowel. You can hear it quite clearly in my speech, but in some people's speech you really can't hear much of a difference, pedigree, mimicry. Cuckoo has to have long oo at the end. Thank you has this weak vowel, reduction vowel. Well, the whole point of recognizing weak vowels is in order to describe the process of weakening, which, as I say, you find in some languages, but not in others. So we've got these sets of words that are similar, like anatomic, but anatomy. Now, obviously they're related, they have the same spelling, but yet their pronunciation is really rather different, because we say anatomic and anatomy. I think I've got a picture of that, if you just skip ahead for a moment. There it is. Okay, there's some anatomy, and there's the adjective anatomical. Do you notice what happens? We first of all have to locate the stress. Once we know where the stress is, then that's going to have a strong vowel. So nat is going to be strong. But the other vowels will probably weaken. So in all the other syllables of this word, we've got weak vowels. Anatomy, anatomy. This is the theatre formerly known as the anatomy theatre, now called the J.Z. Young, but it used to be anatomy, and this is still the anatomy building. If you say anatomy, okay, we can understand, but it doesn't sound very English. The adjective, on the other hand, ick, you know about the suffix ick? Ick causes stress to fall on the syllable just before it. So the syllable stressed is going to be the tom, for ick, tomic. So that's going to have a strong vowel, tomical. We have a rule in English that says you can't have two weak syllables in succession at the beginning of a word. Every word has got to start with either the first or the second syllable strong. So here we, on a sort of alternating principle, we have a strong first syllable, and indeed it's stressed as well. So anatomical. The others weaken, and we have anatomical. Let's go back to the previous screen. We've got more examples on the handout. Democratic, but democracy. Variety, but to vary. Variant. You can see how the last vowel in vary is the weak form of the I in variety. It's the weak version of that vowel. Immune has a strong oo, but into immunize, we get this weakening to the thank you vowel, immunize. And I may say in some varieties of English, the thank you vowel goes to schwa and becomes people say thank you, something like that, and say immunize. Compete gives competitive and competition, where we see that between the P and the T we have E in compete, E in competitive, and in competition. Because in many related words, there's also a relationship between strong long vowel, strong weak vowel, strong short vowel, I should say, and weak vowel. Most dramatically, we see this in the function words. And I expect you know about this, and your teacher will certainly make you practice them. We have 30, 40 function words, words that have weak forms. They're auxiliary verbs, prepositions, articles, bits and pieces like that. So we have a strong form, can, and a weak form, can. A strong form, of, and a weak form, of, cup of tea. Strong form, them, weak form, them. I've got them with me. Strong form, are, weak form, What are those? I'll tell you what they are. Me, we've discussed, you, we've discussed. Now, interestingly enough, there are a number of words where speakers can't altogether make up their mind whether to use a strong vowel or a weak vowel. So, you can say Monday, or you can say Monday. And I think it's wrong to ask which of these is correct, because the answer is that both of them are correct. Both of them are available to the speaker. Depending on the person and so on, one or other may predominate, but most people have day in a very salient or exposed position. So we might say, I'll do it on Monday. On the other hand, in less exposed, less salient positions, Monday morning, you're likely to weaken it. You can say November with O, strong, or you can say November with O, weak. Yes?
I think you very rightly called the shorter form of Monday a weak form.
Yeah.
The shorter form Monday, a weak form. That's how you categorize it. I think very rightly in the LPD. Nobody else has done that before.
Oh, well, thank you for that answer. This is a compliment. Yes. Well, I'm glad to hear that Jack thinks I'm right. I think I'm right too. But Jack has other views that don't altogether agree. Please read Jack's blog or others of his writings. He has a number of interesting articles on the internet in which he sets forth his views, and he is not hesitant to criticize me, so okay. That's very fruitful, of course, to have a dialogue and discussion about these things. Where we got to? Yes. Sometimes there are things that are, again, not well documented. Namely, in singing, people often use unexpectedly strong vowels, if you like. So, if I'm talking ordinarily, I'm going to say angel, either with O or with a syllabic L, angel, angel, doesn't matter which. But if I'm singing, I might well sing angels with E. You could listen to the melody, but if we're singing it, it might be a melody with a strong O in the middle. That's part of the special style for singing, but it does show how this weakening, strengthening business is something that's real to speakers of the language, because they can select a stronger version or a weaker version of of the vowels in many words. Not all of them. I also wrote in my blog some time ago about the word enemy. An enemy is someone you are not friends with. And I pronounce this enemy. But I was singing with a choir of other people who I noticed were singing enemy. And it happened to be singing where there was a full note given to this word, all his enemies shall perish, or something. And so I decided, really, I've got to change my pronunciation. I can't sing enemies when they're all singing enemies. That's just a question of the choice of weak vowel. Nobody strengthens it. Nobody says enemies, as far as I know. So it's a complicated situation and not really very thoroughly described, in my view. We had that. Oops. All right, another bit of the handout reproduced. So to summarize about weak vowels, we've got, if you like, a weak vowel system which operates in certain but not all unstressed syllables. Now, we've seen there are three obvious members, the happy vowel, the thank you vowel, and the schwa. But in most kinds of English, there are also some other possibilities. In received pronunciation, we can clearly also have a weak I, and probably a weak O. Because in a word like finishing, really there's no reason to suppose that anything other than the stressed vowel has a strong vowel. So that's a strong I in fin, but the other ones really look like weak I. Perhaps the best evidence of this is what happens in Australian English. Australians say finishing. The verb is to finish. Finish, and you can hear that weakening of the ish. Now, the Australians took English from England only 200 years ago or so. That information that that's a weak vowel must already have been there in the language, even though you can't hear it in my pronunciation finish. In some sense, it's just a coincidence that the strong and the weak form of the same vowel sound the same for me. You can also get this with the weak form of it, the pronoun. Now, I have no overt weak form of it, because it sounds just the same as the strong form, it. Though we do have weak forms of other pronouns, them, you, we. So you sort of expect it to have a weak form. When Australians use it, usually they pronounce it ut, because it's usually weak. So they say, pick it up, pick it up. They know it's a weak vowel, so they weaken it to because in Australian English, they don't use it as a weak vowel nearly as much as we do in English. But what I conclude from these interesting facts is that we do know, even in English, that it's weak, even though it sounds just like the same strong vowel. Well, that's for the advanced students among you. Most of you can ignore it. Or here's the same sort of argument. I don't say stimulus, usually with an schwa, though some people do. I say stimulus. It isn't even quite as close as in immunize. Or indeed, when I compare stimulus and stimulate, I don't feel they're quite the same for me. Though these are all obviously weak vowels, and it's very difficult to establish contrasts among weak vowels. There seems to be a social difference between executive with an U and a schwa executive, though difficult to demonstrate that. Virulent. Okay, so we've seen that a stressed syllable must contain a strong vowel, but the converse does not hold, because we can have unstressed strong vowels. Obviously in a compound like bedtime, we don't change it to bedtin or something, but there are plenty of morphemically solid words like acorn. Now, an acorn is not any kind of corn, that's just a word you can't divide. Acorn, a fruit of an oak tree. And it's pronounced with a stress on the A, but we don't weaken it. Most of us we don't say acorn. There may be one or two, but it's unusual. Acorn. Similarly, those who do the same work as I do are my colleagues. Colleagues, they're not my colleagues, it's not stressed on the league, but it's stressed on the col without any weakening. They're not colleagues, they're colleagues. Chemical names like sulfate. There are plenty of words with ate where we do weaken, of course, all the adjectives on the whole. Considerate, geminate, articulate. Though not the corresponding verbs to articulate. Gymnast, we don't weaken it to a gymnast, we keep it as a strong N. Most words in MENT have mote, government, payment, and so on, but one or two don't. We say torment with air. Tricky. So we've had that screen before. There we are again, just to remind us. Moving on from there, the logical place now to talk about syllabic consonants is here, because English has various consonants, N's and L's mainly, American English R's, which make a syllable of their own. We can count syllables in English. Suddenly has 3 syllables, tumptity, suddenly, 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 suddenly. It has to have 3 syllables, suddenly. But it doesn't need an actual vowel between the D and the N. You could say suddenly, but mostly we don't. Mostly we say suddenly, 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 with what's called nasal release between the D and the N. And my analysis of this phenomenon is to say that syllabic N is a way of pronouncing schwa plus N. In certain positions, this is what we do. This is one of the places where it's most likely to happen, suddenly. But the possibility of an overt schwa always remains. So I have a garden attached to my house. It's a garden. That's what I call it. But some people might call it a garden. I still know what they will mean. There are other positions, for example, at the end of the word station, where it might be difficult to decide whether we have an up there. Am I saying station, or am I saying station? Difficult to tell at speed, station. So really this is not a meaningful distinction. Worse still, if I say I had another go at something, I had another try, in my normal speech at normal rate I'll say I had another go. I had another, do you hear what's happening? Had another. The of another becomes a syllabic N after the D. Even 3 separate words. I had a nice time the other day. I had a nice time. Had a nice time. So this rule of syllabic consonant formation, I think, is a very alive rule in spoken English. Here's some more syllabic consonants then. We've had some relatively rare syllabic N, words like blossom, and there are lots of people who don't do a syllabic N but say blossom, blossom. You can also get a syllabic N through assimilation to the surrounding consonants. So you can say, I happened to come around here the other day, happened, syllabic N instead of N by assimilation. Syllabic L in words like medal, an alternative to medal. We generally speaking recommend people to use syllabic L here, medal, but again I'm sorry to say the language is changing. If you listen to young people, you will hear lots and lots of people saying medal. I always notice this in the word gentleman, which I say with a syllabic L, gentleman. What do I hear? Right, left and centre? Gentleman. Gentleman. With an ordinarily released T, not a naturally released T. Okay, we do have a few syllabic R's in my kind of English, in words like gathering, where, again, schwa R can come together to give you gathering, but it doesn't have to. It's quite okay to say gathering. In American English, on the other hand, words like father, this is normal to have a syllabic R. Okay, we've seen that English has a number of vowels, a rather large number of vowels, 20 in all, monophthongs and diphthongs, which it's necessary to keep apart from one another. This is going to be a problem for any learners in whose language there are fewer vowels. Secondly, English also has another vowel system, you can say, namely weak vowels, which are used in some but not all unstressed syllables. So I hope that gives you plenty to think about. Thank you for your attention.